Okay, so today we're going to talk about how manufacturers and distributors of electronic components set prices. A lot of people have heard, I think everybody probably just accepts that large companies have a big price advantage because they buy in volume. And I'm speaking of the suppliers now, so large EMS companies, large distributors like to suggest that they have an advantage because they buy in such big volume. Um, and this suggests that their size and their scale automatically is going to transfer to some kind of better pricing for you. But the reality of how electronic component pricing works is just much more complex and nuanced. Relying on an EMS partner to manage your component costs is a risky approach, and that's an understatement. No top tier OEM would let their EMS suppliers control their component prices. It'd be out of the question. So if the size of an EMS supplier or distributor isn't a key determinant of prices, what is? And the answer may surprise you. It's you. You're the most important element. So to explain that, let's talk about how distribution works. Um, it's important to kind of just understand the landscape first. So distributors fall into two broad categories. There's authorized distributors and unauthorized distributors. So unauthorized distributors, we often hear them called the gray market or brokers, things like that. And they kind of operate outside of official channels, if you will. On the other hand, authorized distributors like DigiKey and Mauser, they have formal contracts with the manufacturers like Texas Instruments and Microchip, granting the distributor very specific privileges that are crucial for managing inventory and pricing. So there's two primary privileges that distinguish an authorized distributor. The first is called stock rotation, and this allows the distributor to return slow-moving inventory to the manufacturer and exchange it for other inventory that they think might move quicker. So hence the idea you're going to rotate your stock. In recent years, manufacturers have been less generous with this privilege, so it kind of becomes less and less valuable, but it's still out there. The second and critical thing is the ship from stock and debit system, or the debit system. This is the most important privilege, and it's central to understanding how component pricing is controlled and adjusted. So let's focus on that. So there are three broad types of electronic component prices, and they're called book price, broken price, and direct price, and they each play a little bit different role. So let's start with take them in order. Let's start with book price. This is what you typically see on a distributor's website or aggregators like Octopart and Fine Chips. And it's usually based on purchasing volume. So you'll see, there'll be a 1 to 50 piece price, a 50 to 100 unit price, and so on. This price is usually the suggested retail price that's published by the component manufacturer, but it doesn't have to be. The distributors are free to set whatever price they want, but most commonly they use the suggested price. Now, the actual price that the distributor paid to the manufacturer is referred to as the book cost. And distributors pay the manufacturer the book cost, and they always hold it in their inventory at the book cost. The listed price that you see on the distributor's website, that reflects the distributor's markup over the book cost, and that can be based on many things, but again, they normally use the manufacturer's suggested price. But they have freedom to do what they want. Now, in many cases these days, distributors offer a preferred pricing model to specific customers. And this is reflecting an adjusted margin, but still based on the book cost. So DigiKey might say, hey, you've been a great customer. We're going to give you X% discount on all your purchases. or they'll say you're going to get this much on microprocessors and this much on capacitors, and they might vary it by commodity. And so that's really become quite common. But a key thing to keep in mind here is that the distributor is offering that on their own, and they have still paid the book cost to the manufacturer. Now, the second type of pricing is called broken price. This goes by different words. It's also called contract pricing or special pricing, or other things with similar meaning. And this comes into play during competitive bids, typically higher value bids. And in these cases, the manufacturer might agree to break the book cost and offer a distributor a lower price or a break on the price that they've already paid. And since the distributor holds the inventory at the book cost, the manufacturer needs to issue them an accounting debit to essentially refund them back the cost, and then that lowers their cost basis and allowing them to offer a more competitive price. So, for example, if a distributor is holding 1,000 units of a component and they paid a book cost of $1 a unit, the prices you see online might be $1.50 for low volumes, $1.30 for larger orders. If a customer then comes in and says, I want to buy 500 units, the distributor might, not always, but might approach the manufacturer for a broken cost and ask for a quote. And the distributor may decide to issue a debit and effectively reducing those costs of those 500 units. So let's say they're going to issue a debit for 30 cents and reduce the cost now to 70 cents. And the distributor would then apply a margin to that broken cost, let's say 25%, and now they're able to sell the units at a broken price of 93 cents. And so that's the basics. That's called the ship from stock and debit system, debit for short. And it's absolutely crucial to understanding how production pricing is managed and what is actually happening. It's also crucial to understand that debit, that authority to go back and debit, is specific to the customer. That they can only debit down parts that are sold to that customer to that cost. It's very controlled by the manufacturer. And another key here is that the manufacturer is likely to offer that same broken cost to any distributor that requests it for a given opportunity. It encourages a level playing field. There's certainly nuances to how that works, and some play that game better than others. But the idea is the manufacturer wants you, the customer, to be able to buy from the distributor of your choice at the favored price that the manufacturer wants to extend to you. And then the third and final type of price is a direct price. And this is the cost directly quoted by the manufacturer to the customer and bypassing distribution altogether. This is employed when the manufacturer and the OEM have a direct purchasing agreement, and it's usually for a larger volume, certainly larger value. Sometimes strategic relationships could get you a direct account, as we say, but it's unusual. The direct prices are obviously very specific to that single customer. And the direct price would also commonly be extended through to the EMS company. So if Texas Instruments agrees to sell you something that's normally $1 and they agree to sell it to you for 50 cents, they will also agree to sell it to almost any contract manufacturer for 50 cents as well. And again, the idea is that you have the freedom to manage your affairs as you see fit. So now we come to what factors actually directly influence the price decision. So with that understanding, let's talk first about the manufacturer's pricing strategy. They're going to determine, and now this of course assumes that they're wanting to extend a broken cost to you. In that circumstance, then the things, there are three main things that they're looking at the customer and judging. And the first is the commodity spend. And that's because at semiconductor companies, the products are all split into product groups managed by a product manager who basically has a P&L over that set of products. And so he's the guy that is the kind of the end of the line for the pricing, or he's the main guy for the pricing that's going to get extended to you. And he wants to know how much are you spending in his commodity, not just how much are you spending in his company. And his goal obviously is to capture market share for his commodity. Now, this guy is also going to have an interest in customers that have strategic value. So if you're somebody who's a marquee name or in a particular niche, and you select their product, they're gonna really like that, because they'll get to use that in marketing to other customers. Okay, the second big factor in the pricing decisions is your geographic location. Manufacturers consider the geographic location when setting prices, and it's actually a big deal. In a very broad way, they view the United States and Europe as low volume NPI markets. And they price the US and Europe higher than they do in markets that they consider high volume. So hello, China, and anywhere in Asia. And there, the expectation is that the orders are going to be large and the demand is going to be sustained, ongoing. And so that's why they tend to price it there. It is just business, but it reflects the idea that in the local markets there's going to be lower volume, but there's higher innovation and customization needed. So you have some justifications, but that's the long and short of it is the U.S. and Europe tend to get priced higher than Asian markets. And then the final thing is strategic considerations, and I touched on this earlier. A strategic interest plays a role when the manufacturers want to be seen in your product. Getting your product designed into an iPhone, as an example, is quite an endorsement of the value of that product. And this goes through for all OEM verticals. There'll be an interest in getting on the BOM, getting in the design of customers that are marquee, even if it's just in a niche, if it's a small market. So those are the main things that influence a manufacturer to extend broken prices. Then the second thing is what do distributors care about? What is their main thing when it comes to pricing? Now, obviously, they don't have any control over their costs. The cost is set by the manufacturer for the reasons we described above. But they do control their own profit margin that they apply to these costs. And that margin is impacted by two things in very broad ways that play with each other. And the first is just straight up market dynamics. And again, that's by commodity. So the kind of the supply and demand imbalance in a particular product will greatly influence what they want to do with margin. So if they feel like they've got a tremendous amount of demand and they're only getting a small supply from their manufacturers, that's obviously going to, those are the conditions that can lead to higher margins. But sometimes that's offset by the second, and really the most important thing to distributors is the relationship value. And they're, in a good way to think about it is that for any given commodity, there's a range where the distributor is going to set the margin. Kind of a high end and a low end of the range. There's kind of an interplay here between what they call the DTAM at your account, which is the distributor total available market, and that's how much of their franchise lines they think that you could buy. So the bigger your DTAM, the more they're going to value your relationship. The more they think that your DTAM is going to grow, also the more attention they'll pay to you. So especially for early phase company, it's a really key thing to be working on, is to really court the people at your preferred distributors and really let them know your story, really almost exactly like you're trying to court investors or your first customer. You want them to feel like you're worth paying attention to. When market availability is deeply constrained, then both these things can go out the window. But generally speaking, relationship value is going to prevent really getting surge priced over a component situation. So that's basically how the system works. So the result is then EMS companies, they basically have access to the same price. It doesn't really matter how big the EMS company or how small it is, or I should say it doesn't have to matter. A way to think about it is access to the same pricing is not the same as the skill and knowledge necessary to access those prices. So too often you see small EMS companies who buy the myth. I think most EMS companies think that that's true. I think they think that that's how it works, and that Flex has got a huge advantage over them. And kind of because they don't really understand the system, it's easy to ask the wrong questions. So, for example, if an EMS company or an OEM, wants to go buy 1,000 parts to do a build, right? A kind of a naive EMS or a naive OEM will say, "Hey, what's the price for 1,000?" But the savvy buyer knows that the component manufacturer and the distributor actually base their pricing decisions on annual volume. And they'll ask the customer, "Well, what's your annual usage?" And let's say it's actually $1,000 pieces a month. Well, that's 12,000 a year. And that's the number that they're going to use to go get pricing. They're going to go to the manufacturer. Distributor will go to the manufacturer and say, "I'd like a special price for 12,000, and it'll be shipped over the year." And that's extremely standard. Kind of an exception to this rule, there are situations where large EMS companies and certain large distributors, I'm looking at you, future, will make large bulk purchases and to try to capture a lower price. It's uncommon, but it does happen, and where it does tends to be in low-cost things like passive components, resistors, capacitors, inductors, etc. Kind of a last idea in all this is particularly if you're working with an EMS company, you really have to be buyer beware on all of this because in general, EMS companies use a cost-plus model. So it's to their advantage for you to believe that a cost is high, and so it's in their DNA to present a high cost and then try to achieve a lower cost on the back end, and therefore increase their profit margin. So it goes back to large savvy OEMs don't let EMS companies negotiate their prices, their component prices. So the practical takeaways. So let's boil this down to 5 key takeaways. The first is to really understand you are the most important factor in pricing. Your distribution partners, your EMS partners are crucial to your success, but they're not the main thing in your component pricing. You are the main thing. Never rely on, second thing, never rely on EMS providers for pricing. They play a critical role. They do amazing things. They're hugely undervalued for the technical contribution that they make to the manufacturing process, but don't trust them for component prices. Leverage geographic location is the third thing. Leverage geographic location and your commodity spin. This is especially true if you have facilities in Asia, or you can point to things in Asia and potentially buy them through Asia. And again, emphasize your commodity spin. The fourth thing is understand these pricing mechanisms. Know how a book price, broken price, direct price works. It's like anything else in the world. When the person on the other side of the table realizes that you know what you're talking about, it's a real bullshit shield. And the fifth thing is build strong relationships with distributors. Especially if you're a new upcoming or startup company. The distributors have the flexibility to adjust margins just based on their relationship, and they can make an impression and influence the manufacturers. So as I mentioned earlier, the semiconductor companies, they want to know, do they think you're going to be a successful company? Are you going to be somebody that they should watch? Well, you know who their number one source of that information is? It's the distributors, right? Because the distributors have, 20 people in the field, 30, 40, 50 people in the field for every one that a manufacturer does. So authorized distributors are the eyes and ears of the manufacturer, and you want them saying positive things about you. So in summary, electronic component pricing is a lot more multifaceted than probably meets the eye. But understanding how these things work really puts you in a situation or in a place to optimize your situation and secure the best possible prices, based on your circumstances.